Yeah, I think going to your first unit, that's huge. You know, you've been through all this training, you've been around other lieutenants and captains and above, and now you're going to go
take care of the NIDS.
Take a platoon, and you're going to have real Marines.
How many people in a platoon?
It's changed a little bit now, but at that time, 42.
42.
Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure riding with you over a 5-day trip in Hokkaido, right?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And same here. My first group ride, I've been a Lone Ranger up until this point.
Right.
So.
And you're 56 years old, right?
56.
Right. And you told me this is the first time you've been riding only for a year.
I got my license in May of 21. Started riding in February. Went to a Japanese motorcycle school, and
right by my home.
Yeah,
Hinomaru. Yeah,
that was fantastic and great training, fantastic training that you would. And it was about, once the dust settled, about $2,500, which is about what you pay for good training in the United States. Very good instructors. Graduated in May, so I've only been riding for
But let me say this to everyone. I just want to suggest this to everybody. I told Chris when he first started riding that if I knew him before he went to get his bike, because he was obviously having his midlife crisis, not to get a motorcycle. It is very, very difficult, and it's really it's an accident waiting to happen. And that's someone who's been riding since I was like 10 years old. Chris did such a good job, but I give the credit, not knowing his background, but I'd say give the credit mostly to his military time.
Interesting you say that.
That's what did it. He's been trained by the most powerful, strongest company in the planet. They spend billions of dollars to learn how the human beings work. So within 6 to 8 weeks, they get a human being to be willing to give their life for a medal they'll never see. That's why you're able to do what you did.
Well, that's very interesting because you're right. Your military career tends to be a succession of them throwing things at you, technical mixed with the physical, mixed with the cognitive. Yeah, and you've got to assimilate it and master it to a certain level in a certain amount of time, and which is also one of the impetuses for me getting a motorcycle license. So I was sitting around during COVID, at home, everyone's on lockdown, and I'm going through looking at various gun videos. I collect guns and shoot guns back in the United States. And buying some ammo, and my wife said, "You need a hobby." And I said, "Well, I have a hobby." She said, "No, that's not. This is Japan. Right. You need a hobby here." And I said, "Well, I wanted to ride a motorcycle." My roommate from college went to VMI. He's a Marine also. He's been riding since he was like 9 years old, and so he had been bugging me for years to get a motorcycle license. So that was.
Is he here?
He's in America.
Okay.
We actually retired on the exact same day, and then so my wife said, "Do it. Just go find a school, and because she said, and she was right. She said you need something that's technical, that involves gear and equipment
risk.
That you have. Yeah, there's a certain amount of risk.
It's a whole lot of risk.
I mean, one of the things I said when I retired was that I'm not going to miss." Going into places where people are trying to kill me all the time. And however, you do miss a certain amount of risk that just comes with daily being in the military, because it's exciting. It's controlled risk.
That's true. You get an adrenaline rush. There's no doubt about it.
It's risk versus gamble. Gamble are things you can't recover from if you make a mistake, and risks are more calculated.
Well, our trip was really successful. No one hit the road. No one got road rash.
Right. Yeah.
And
no close calls. Nothing.
You led us in a downpour.
Also
and I
a
said,
first.
Look at this guy.
Also a first.
I said, it was raining hard. It wasn't just a little rain. We got soaked.
Yes.
And that was really something. I said,
challenge.
Go for it. Look at him go.
Because I'm always concerned about road conditions,
right.
and hear all the horror stories and watch some of these videos on YouTube about accidents and what causes them. A lot of it's road conditions. Guys not paying attention. And you can't see the road, right in front of you.
We went through a cloud. We went through a bunch of clouds.
Right.
We couldn't see each other.
Couldn't see anything.
You in the front. Were you in the front?
Yeah, I was.
You led us through
the whole day. It was the whole day.
You had on your flashes, and I had on my flashes, and we had Peter in the center.
Right.
Because he had no flashes, and we rode that way through the clouds.
And at certain points, I tried to put my visor down. you can't see, and then you open it, you're getting pelted in the face. I had glasses on, and at some point I said, well, the pain of getting pelted in the face is better than the complete, almost blacked out conditions.
Hitting the wall or something, right?
Yeah.
Wow, we made it.
Tell
me, Chris, where were you born?
I was born in Charleston, West Virginia, but my parents both worked for American Airlines at the time, and 1966, and so we very quickly moved from there. So I don't remember that. I tell people I'm from Texas because from the time I was a baby, I grew up there. So even my
both parents worked for American Airlines. So your father was a pilot, or were they both?
No, he came out of World War II, got a college degree on the GI Bill, went to work for American in customer service. Okay. And met my mother there, and and worked until the day he died for American Airlines. So.
Is that right?
So they moved to Dallas in 1966, and that's what I remember growing up is Texas.
Is your mother doing okay now? Is she all right?
She's okay. Yeah, she's 84 and lives with my stepfather. And my biological father, passed away in 1987.
How old were you at that time?
And then I was 21, 22, 21, I guess.
So you were already out the house.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry, 1985. Okay. So I was my first year at VMI. And if you know anything about VMI, there's a RAT line. It's your sort of basic training indoctrination. So we had just come out of the RAT line.
This is for the Marines?
This is for college.
For college,
VMI. Virginia Military Institute. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a state military academy, if you will. And I was on a Marine Corps scholarship. So. Right. But I was there, and he passed away there. So. But my parents live my stepfather and my mom live in Florida. Right. I'm a Florida resident.
Have you said hello to your mom yet?
Hi, Mom.
Do you have siblings?
I don't. I'm an only child.
You told me that. I just wanted people to hear that. And your wife is too.
And my wife is too, which gets interesting sometimes.
And that's the thing. I remember the one thing that you said to me is, I said, do you ever have any conflicts? And you said, yes, sometimes. And we both look at each other and say, you're acting like an only child.
Yeah. You know exactly when it's happening, so.
Isn't that interesting? So tell me this. So growing up in Texas, would you say in elementary school, were you more academic or were you more physical? Were you more sports minded?
I think I was more academic. I had dabbled in sports here and there. I remember, but nothing really caught on.
Like what?
Well, I played some football in junior high. What? It was okay. Didn't really like it that much. I gravitated, in high school. Later on in junior high and high school, gravitated to Boy Scouts. And then gravitated towards military youth organizations. So there's an organization called Civil Air Patrol, which is not the official auxiliary of the U.S. Air Force. And again, if you know anything about Civil Air Patrol,
said it isn't.
It is, yeah. It's sponsored by the Air Force. Okay. They have a cadet program. They do search and rescue. But the cadet program is, they have uniforms. Your uniforms look like, my knowledge may be dated. I haven't been around Civil Air Patrol in a while, but we had U.S. Air Force uniforms. You change the buttons, but otherwise, and so I like that. You learn to drill and you learn military things, and you're around military things, and then I was living in Ohio at the time, and
Why were you in Ohio?
Yeah, so my parents my parents were divorced when I was about 3 in Texas. My mom remarried. We went to New Mexico.
So you only go on.
Yeah, he was an aerospace engineer for Rockwell, which is now part of the company that I work for, but from there to Oklahoma, he passed away. We moved up to Ohio to be near my aunt and my uncle. And so
your mother's been married 3 times.
Yes.
She's on her 3rd now.
Right.
Okay. So were you close with your stepfather?
Not so much. Okay. He was a good guy, but not so much. He was an okay guy. He was didn't know what to do with kids and didn't. He didn't
have any.
No. He was a bachelor until he was 40, and so it's kind of tough to make a transition. But taught me a lot. Taught me things about auto mechanics that I didn't know. I remember, I could. When I was in 6th grade, I could change the oil on a car. I could change spark plugs, set the spark plugs. I could do when cars used to have points. I could change points on cars. Yes. And I knew what catalytic converters were, and I knew I could. I'm very fond of, if I have a problem with a vehicle, if it's under warranty, I don't touch it. But if it's not under warranty, I'm pretty comfortable with digging in and I mean, you could practically build your own space shuttle with YouTube nowadays. So
isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth?
So he taught me a lot.
Did you stay inside a lot? I mean, did you read a lot when you were a kid?
Yeah, not necessarily. I read quite a bit. Yeah,
Okay.
quite a bit. I did well in school.
What kind of books did you like to read?
I like to read. I really again gravitated towards adventure stories and military stories. And my father had fought in World War II, and my uncle, his brother, only two children. And so I would go see him in the summertime, and I grew up with these, they would, sometimes my uncle would come, and because his wife had passed away, and there'd be the three of us, and the entire period of the summer I was there would be constant, World War II stories. And sometimes I would, goad them on, but a lot of, it was just such a part of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't help but talk about it, even, this would be the 80s.
What theater was he in?
They were both in the Pacific.
Pacific, okay.
Yeah, my dad was with the 24th Marine Air Group. Yeah, Air Group.
That's why you picked Marines?
Yeah, and then my uncle was with the 1st Marine Division. He was a rifleman.
Okay, so you couldn't do anything else.
I couldn't do anything else. And so they talked about, and they were both in fairly close combat. My uncle in the 1st Marine Division was Peleliu, Okinawa. If you've seen the Pacific, the series.
Yes.
I mean, my uncle was those were the experiences that he had, and so.
Were they both enlisted, or were they?
They're both enlisted.
Enlisted, okay.
They were getting set for the invasion of Japan.
Right.
And I remember they would tell me the Marine Corps sent them back to an island to see each other because that was going to be it. I mean, they were expecting, everyone was expecting to be killed.
Right.
And so when they didn't get killed, when it didn't happen and the war was over with, they were, of course, quite happy about that.
I'm sure they were.
Yeah, and then my uncle stayed in the Marine Corps for another 20 years.
He made a career.
He made a career.
But your father got out after his 4 years?
He got out and went on the GI Bill, went to college, went to work for American. I have a letter, actually, from my uncle on Marine Corps stationery, typed from 1946. He's in Japan during the occupation, and it's to my grandparents, and he's talking about, buy the house, we're sending you, my father's name was Ted, Ted and I are sending you the money we've saved, do all this, I'm getting out, I'm going to get a job and all this.
But this is from your uncle?
From my uncle, and it turns out he didn't get out.
He didn't get out, right.
He stays in, fights in the Korean War, goes to China with the 1st Marine Regiment to fight the communist Chinese as we're trying to repatriate the Japanese and turn the infrastructure over to the nationalist government, the rightful government, with the communists pressing in. So fighting the Chinese in 1946, and then goes to Korea, fights the Korean War, Chosin Reservoir, all that stuff. Lingering health problems his entire life from that. And then I remember him saying, I never understood this as a kid, but he said in the 60s, they said, okay, you're going to go to Vietnam. And he said, no, I'm not. I'm going to retire. He said, look, he had just been in so many firefights, and his body was so messed up that,
So tell me, okay, so out of high school, you picked no sports at all?
No, I did. Like I said, I played junior high. I played a little. I played baseball in grade school, and then a little football, but then I got involved in the Civil Air Patrol, and then in this thing called Young Marines, which was sponsored by the Marine Corps League at the time, which I tell people the Marine Corps League is really a collection of guys that get out of the Marine Corps and they get together once a week or once a month or whatever and drink and tell stories. Okay. But they had a perfect group of guys to sponsor a youth organization, right? Okay. And so we loved these guys. Every one of my instructors there were, we had a couple of active duty guys in the reserve guys that were younger, but they were all combat vets, all Vietnam vets, and just bigger than life according to us, in our eyes, and full of stories, and so that really solidified my interest. And I applied for a Marine Corps scholarship and got it. And then
you were 18?
Yeah, was it when I was 18?
18, okay.
And I enlisted at the same time, and I said, well, I'm going one way or the other. I mean,
you could do that.
Yeah, you could do it. So I enlisted in the delayed entry program,
right? And
then simultaneously applied for a Marine Corps scholarship and got the scholarship. And what they do is they discharge you from the enlisted side, and then went to VMI, Virginia Military Institute, and
how long was that?
4 years.
4 years.
I was a mechanical engineering major.
And you come out what? Lieutenant?
I came out second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant. Okay.
You graduate from VMI. You go back to your room. You take your cadet uniform off. You put your newly minted Marine Corps uniform on. And you go down for commissioning, and you're off.
Mom and Dad were there?
Yeah, Mom and Dad were there. Yeah, my mom pinned on one of my bars. my then girlfriend, now wife, pinned on the other one. So
is that right?
yeah,
So you knew her then?
I knew her then. I'm not wearing it today, unfortunately. I should have worn it, but via my ring, you have a ceremony and a big dance. It spans the whole weekend, the ceremony and the functions. And she was my date for that weekend. So
did you knew you were going to marry her?
I probably figured it out pretty soon. Pretty quick. Yeah, as we went along. Actually, okay. So I was a second lieutenant. She was working in the D.C. area for, I think, Nav Air. She was a budget analyst for Naval Air. And I had received my duty station out of the basic school to go to Hawaii. And so we got married right before we went to Hawaii.
So tell me some of the highlights. When you get into the service, you get your commission. What are some of the highlights that just stand out, the first things you start thinking about from being in the Marines? Let's see if you were limited to a few things you could say.
Yeah, I think going to your first unit, that's huge. You've been through all this training, you've been around other lieutenants and captains and above, and now you're going to go
take care of the enlistees.
Take a platoon, and you're going to have real Marines.
How many people in a platoon?
It's changed a little bit now, but at that time 42.
42.
And so it's never completely fleshed out to TO, but about 30 Marines is what I inherited.
Okay.
And these are real Marines. It's not school anymore, right? So that was huge.
These people are different ranks.
Yeah, enlisted.
Oh, so it's not just basic.
No, we're ranging from privates all the way up to your platoon sergeant is a staff sergeant, right? So. Yeah, so you're gonna go out there now and
with people that have more experience than you.
Yeah, and this is the real deal. So went to Hawaii at that time, 1st Marine Brigade, which is no longer, if you know anything about Marine Corps Air Ground Task Force stuff, that there's a brigade. We don't have an established brigade there anymore, but we still have obviously a massive organization. Mm-hmm. And then very quickly after getting there, went to about 6 months. No less, about 6 months of training, of exercise. Went to Okinawa, and while we were in the air, Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait, and so we hit the ground. And in January then of 91,
still second lieutenant.
Still second lieutenant. I think I pinned on first lieutenant somewhere in there.
Okay.
And then we go to Saudi Arabia for Desert Storm. So that was a big one.
You were part of Desert Storm.
Yeah, part of Desert Storm. So
you were going across. I mean, on CNN, we're watching.
Oh yeah.
Weren't you guys there before we saw that?
A lot of guys went right.
That's
so right when he invaded, there were a lot of people we sent there, and so they sort of.
The Marines are first in, last out.
They lingered in the desert. I think technically, for those that'll comment on this, the 101st was sent in. 101st Airborne Division, which is an air mobile division, was sent in first because they could get there the quickest via aviation. But they needed. When the Marine Corps arrives, we bring a lot of logistics. We tend to bring staying power. Mm-hmm. Nothing against my Army brethren, but the Marine Corps travels with its own stuff. When it gets there, it can stay there and fight that way. So Marine Corps comes. These guys sit in the desert for 6 months, which I didn't envy. We don't get there till January of the next year, so we actually only had to sit there for a couple of months, I think.
Right. And it only lasted 6 months.
Yeah,
didn't it?
Well, there was kind of the Sitzkrieg, if you will, that lasted until January, late January. We start the aerial campaign, take out their targets. Mm-hmm. We get there a week or two before that, or a few days before that actually, and then we move into forward positions, and we kind of sit there and every night B-52s go overhead. A couple hours later, you're either you're on actual patrols, practicing something, or asleep, and you hear the B-52s just rumbling in the distance.
So what was it like for you? So you're there, you have this is your first assignment.
You're
so
there.
What was it like for you?
I mean, listening to those B-52s was comforting. You're thinking, hey, they're doing some dirty work. Right. The more of that I hear, the less, Right. And then the artillery, the Marine Corps and the Army, I assume, but we're doing a lot of artillery raids, so the artillery battalions would come and batteries sometimes would come through our position, stay there till the sun went down, then go. And it wasn't far. We were pretty close to the front. They would go up and shoot at some targets and pull back very quickly. And so that was always fun to listen to. And then it came time to go. And we slowly moved up into a series of positions where there were trench lines and huge berms, and there had been a firefight there a couple weeks beforehand with the
But you had
Iraqis.
people above you too.
Yeah. So I'm in a platoon as part of a company. Company is
right.
4 platoons
Right.
plus a headquarters element. And then that company, there are 3 other rifle companies plus a weapons company, part of a battalion.
Who's over that? A major?
And then, so your company commander's a captain,
Okay.
and then the battalion commander would be a lieutenant colonel,
Lieutenant Colonel.
with a major XO
Right.
and a major operations officer. And and so your golf company, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines.
So there's four second lieutenants or first lieutenants.
Yeah, by this time everybody's a
Four.
first lieutenant.
Right, okay.
Actually 5. This was the XO, and then you've got 1, 2, 3 rifle platoons and weapons
Right.
platoons. There's
So it's
5 lieutenants.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're one of them.
So these are our that's your little
It's
your
your
sort of
little
group. Yeah.
Your group you get together.
Yeah. And then,
Wow.
of course, you know all the lieutenants in the
Of course,
battalion.
you have to,
and
yeah.
we became close over the time, especially sitting in Okinawa waiting. Are we going? Are we going? Are we going? We finally went. So, you know all these guys.
You guys were sitting in Okinawa?
Yeah, waiting for the 6 months because we were in the air when Saddam Hussein invaded. Then we land, and then the Marine Corps got to, then we get the Marine Corps, the U.S. military writ large, get some troops there. And then, but then the U.S. military has to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? Now we have to start organizing ourselves and moving in a more deliberate fashion units forward. And I think, and somebody that knows this history a little better than I will probably correct us, but I believe there are like 2 infantry battalions that didn't go to Desert Storm, and it was those guys were just. I knew some of those guys; they were just gnashing their teeth. Everyone wanted to go.
Then you're prepared to. Yeah,
This is it. I mean,
right,
there was
exactly.
Grenada.
We've been trained for it. Well,
Right.
We've been training for it,
we've been training for this. This is
Right.
what we're doing, right?
That's what we're supposed to
of
do.
course, it's scary, but
But you still want to get a chance to do it.
Right.
That's what you came in for.
we were confident. When you're 20-something,
Yeah, no,
I know why insurance rates are high for driver's insurance for 25-year-olds and
That's right.
under, because
And they drastically go down when you turn
Yeah.
35 or so.
your
'Cause they
risk
know
tolerance
you've
is
been around.
huge.
Well, see, we wouldn't have a military if people were drafted
Right.
when they were in their 40s.
Right.
Because
everyone would stand around going, "Hey, should we really be doing that?
No, no. We really going to do that? No.
This isn't smart. Like, we
That's
could
right.
get killed doing this."
Right. So, okay, so you did that. That was one thing. That's
Yeah,
one
that
of
was
the,
that
one
was
of
a
the
big.
moments. Right.
And then the
This
next
is
time I had to do that, when I was a captain, company commander, I was a Airborne company commander. We went to do non-combatant evacuation operations in several places: Sierra Leone, the Congo, it was they. And I've not, so these kind of stories are always a little difficult. But my combat or my experiences were different than it wasn't trench lines of World War I. It wasn't the jungles of Vietnam. It is what my generation had.
Exactly.
Having said that, it's what you have, right? And you deal with it. But the more you do that sort of thing, it does get a little easier. It does. It's like anything else. It's like exercise or any kind of cognitive skill. The more you do it, and the more you do it under stress, the better you get at it. So when you have to do that again, you tend to be a little more. I've seen this before. I know what to do.
Right.
Yeah. And we had great leaders in Desert Storm, and I think we came through with flying colors.
Yeah, I think we did because I think
Yeah.
the casualty rate was what you could count on your
Extremely
hands.
low. Our
Right,
tactics
it
were
was.
good. Our weapons were
That's right,
good.
yeah. You came in
Our
and
leadership was good. The Marines were good.
you didn't back down. You kept on
You
going.
didn't back down. I mean, normally you go on these training exercises, and some guys don't dig their fighting holes perfectly or whatever, and you have to correct guys. I tell you what, when it's the real deal, man,
They know what to do.
You don't have to tell them. You stop long enough, guys are digging textbook fighting holes.
a little bit more, They're ready to go.
It's a lot easier. So in a lot of ways, going with 3 tours in Iraq, and that kind of stuff's easy.
Right.
Being in Iraq is a lot.
Because they know what to do, and they know
Yeah.
it's life or death.
Right, and all the decisions are practical.
That's right.
You're not dealing with paperwork, and it's all practical. So that was big. I got to go to some. I was very fortunate in my career that I was able to go to a lot of schools, a lot of training.
How much time does it usually take out of your active time if you have to go to schools?
Yeah, the pattern, is typically sometimes when you're in the Marine Corps, again, we used to say you're in a fleet unit, fleet Marine Force unit, or a combat unit, and then you usually do 3 years there, and then you'll be in a maybe on in a B billet, we would call it. So recruiting duty, barracks duty, security guard duty. There's a number of duties you could do like that. So the pattern would be maybe you get to go to a combat-oriented school when you're in the fleet, go away for a few months, come back. And then when you're in your B billet, you typically get to go to schools. Then there are professional schools. So there's a school before you as a captain to prepare you to be a company commander. And then there's a school, there's a command and staff course that you do. Every branch of service has this that you would do before you became a field grade officer, a major, to prepare to be a staff officer. And then there's a commander's course before you get to be, a battalion commander. And then there's War College, and so there's these. But I got to go to some extracurriculars. I went to the Mortar school. The U.S. Army has fantastic schools, by the way. And so I went to the Mortar course at Fort Benning. Great course. Really enjoyed it. Got to go back and be a Mortar platoon commander in my infantry battalion. It was fantastic. And then got to go to Ranger school. Very unusual for Marines to go to Ranger school. Got to go to Airborne school after that. So had always wanted.
Was that conducted by the Air Force?
No, it's all the Army.
Army.
All at Fort Benning.
All of it.
Yeah, and then I went to my advanced infantry course, or my captain's level course, back at Fort Benning, and I told my wife, I said, we just bought a house at Fort Benning, So
yeah, how's your wife dealing with all of this by the time?
Good.
How'd the kids come along?
So we didn't have kids until when I went to Desert Storm, no kids, and then she was pregnant with our oldest daughter when I went to Ranger school. And yeah,
how many years had you been married by that time?
Oh, 5 or 6. About 5, or so. We were married in now I'm under pressure, right, to cough up.
Did she have a career? Did she have a career as well?
And she did. When we went to Hawaii, she worked for a while, and then when we got to my first B billet, if you will, after my infantry battalion duties in Hawaii, was to go to Sasebo, Japan, and be on barracks duty. So I was the executive officer there, and ended up being the OIC.
What was your rank?
I started as first lieutenant, pinned on captain, and became the OIC of that detachment. That detachment's gone, but we used to have a detachment in Sasebo. So she didn't work there. She did. She taught English to a corporate CEO and some other folks. This is the early '90s, and our first daughter was born in Sasebo.
How many people in a detachment?
It can vary. We had about almost 90 Marines.
90 Marines.
Yeah. There are 2 very large ordnance areas that are still there, bunkers that actually used to be Imperial Japanese Navy bunkers. And we do share some of that with the Japanese even still, but and Sasebo is a combined base, but we would guard those facilities and act as a kind of a quick reaction force for the base, and so that detachment's gone, but it was great. 3 years there. I studied kendo, got my shodan. This is 93 to 96.
96.
Yeah, got my shodan in kendo, which I no longer do. Just you go back to the States and there's no one to practice kendo with. But I still have all the kit, and so that was good. And then after that, I went to the Army's advanced course in Fort Benning, and then to be a company commander, did Mediterranean float with Marine Expeditionary Unit, a couple of NEO operations.
What are NEO operations?
Non-combatant evacuation operations. So typically, what happens is the politics in a country, the security situation turns to crap, and you got to get everybody out. Right, and so you send in.
You mean all the people in the embassy? You have to get
the embassy.
And
so what we train for is that you're going to fly into the embassy,
right? And
all these Americans, John and Melissa Smith from Portland, Oregon, are going to show up with their passport. I tell you, it's anything but that. You find a secure landing zone, you land, and usually when these things happen, people are given quite a bit of notice, quite a bit of time to get out on commercial aviation, and then and the State Department tells people, get out, get out of the country. A lot of people don't.
There's always a few.
Yeah, always a few. But you land, and of course, more people out there have American passports than you can possibly believe.
It shouldn't have them or whatever.
Yeah, you just wonder how. And then all of the other nationalities that didn't get out start lining up. The French, the Egyptians,
everybody,
the Germans, the Irish, and what are you going to do? You're not going to turn these people away.
You don't?
No. This is bad. Sure. These are bad situation there. This is there had been a coup. There was
so they can get on our aircraft.
Yeah. So we would prioritize Americans, but frankly, we have clearing stations, and you go through and check documents and all this stuff. And frankly, at some point in time, you want to get off the beach, get off the landing zone, because it wasn't exactly a secure situation. Our potential opponents had a Russian Hind D helicopter, which is an attack helicopter. They had they killed most of their officers and taken the place over, and it was just a huge rabble, and they were going around shooting things and at random, and so you wanted to get out of there. So you pile everybody, and then you typically go to a third site, a third country. In this case, we sailed up the coast. Where did we go? Conakry, which is Guinea, and which is right next door, and you offload those folks to a more secure and thorough admin processing. Mm-hmm. And so we had to do 3 different evacuations. We did an evacuation, waited a day. State Department calls up and says, no, you got to go back in. There's like more people left behind. Back in, and then things really got bad, and then we had to go in and do it off the beach. At first we did it from a hotel that had helipads and a compound. Then we had to go in and secure a big stretch of beach and do it on a beach. And it was really bad. And that's when all humanity sort of broke loose. And I remember some of my Marines saying, hey, I think we've evacuated those guys before. You know, you take them to Conakry, they'd slip back in for whatever. Some of these were fighters, you know, these were, we call them, you know, military age males. And for whatever reason, they needed to recycle or get out again, and they'd take their uniforms off and put on civilian clothes. And they had the right credentials, and you take them on the boat, you know, on the ship, and you know, get them up.
Interesting.
Yeah,
you get to see a lot of things, you know.
Yeah, but some mostly peaceful, mostly you know, non-eventful. Mm-hmm. A couple of sad situations. I remember the French embassy. I think it might have been the ambassador and his wife, or the first political officer, where we came in, and they had a little poodle, and we can't take animals. You know, and you have to tell these people, hey, we can't take the family dog. You know, things like that. But we're very fortunate. Nobody got killed. Everybody got out.
Tell me
we didn't take the Chinese. We wouldn't take the.
You wouldn't.
No, the MU commander's like, I'm not putting communist Chinese on a U.S. warship. That's
how
not
could
happening.
you tell?
So, well, because they had passports.
Okay.
So we turned them away. We took everyone else.
Right. What are some of the best moments while you're in the service?
Yeah, the best moment's always when you come home. Yeah, because see your wife again, see your family again. Those are the best moments.
What's the longest time you ever had to stay away from your wife?
I think in one stretch, my first tour in Iraq as an advisor, we were there for 8 months, I think. Oh wait, Desert Storm might have been longer. I can't remember, one of those two. Mm-hmm. But Iraq certainly was a little more sporting at the time. This was 2004, mm-hmm. 4 over 5. So during that time frame, we did Fallujah Part 2. There's a sort of a Part 1, and things kind of went to heck. And we did Fallujah Part 2, and then Mosul. Mm-hmm. And we were fighting in Mosul, and I was advisor. The Iraqis were doing most of the fighting, but that lasted quite a while. And then so about 8 months later, we came back. We were in Okinawa at the time, so came back home. And
so you retired a lieutenant colonel? Or
colonel, yeah.
A full bird colonel.
I actually came up, so 2 other experiences probably pertinent to I went to the Japanese Command and Staff College, Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force Command. I was the first Marine to do that. So that was very formative.
How did that happen?
I applied to be a foreign area officer, and in the Marine Corps you keep your original military occupational specialty, and being a foreign area officer is kind of a secondary specialty. So they send you to Naval Postgraduate School where you get a master's degree. In this case it was National Security Affairs with an East Asia concentration, and then language school according to what the language or country you've chosen. So Northeast Asia, foreign area officer, but a Japan concentration. So I was talking to a mentor of mine, and he had been the first Marine to go to the Republic of Korea Naval Command and Staff College, and he said, hey, you ought to be the first guy to go to the Japanese command. I was the first Japan FAO in the Marine Corps, and I said, so I just...
What's a FAO?
Foreign Area Officer, FAO, yeah. Okay. Every service has a FAO program. They're all run slightly differently. Okay. And but so I applied and talked to a lot of people. Never been done before. Japan is typically not a country that does things it hasn't done before, and so. But they wanted, the Army had been doing this, and they really wanted a Marine to go there. Mm-hmm. And so when I showed up and said I want to do it, they were very accommodating.
After you, have there been other Marines doing it?
Yes, and after that, so now I've lost track actually.
Okay, so they continued after you.
Yeah, I did my last 5 years in the Marine Corps as a colonel. I was left the Pacific Command in Hawaii, 8 years in Hawaii. or 5 years in Hawaii, sorry, after my battalion command, and then came to Japan, and I was in the Ministry of Defense for 5 years here in Tokyo to try to assist and advise Japan in building an amphibious capability. So during that time, I was able to help coordinate extra slots for Marines to go to Command Staff College.
Okay, and the next thing?
Yeah, then I went to War College after that, with what the Japanese called NIDS, National Institute for Defense Studies. That they moved that from Meguro to Ichigaya.
Right. Yeah, because that's by my home as well.
Yeah, so that was great, and we've been doing that for a while. Marine Corps alternates with the Navy. It was a great experience, and then I got out in. Well, let me back up. Was a battalion commander. Took the battalion to Iraq. We were the last active duty infantry battalion in Iraq. Very quiet. It had not been quiet.
What year was that? What year was that?
That would have been 09.
09, okay.
Yeah, and had not been quiet. And then when we got there, the pacification program and all the programs we were putting into place were having an effect, and actually was pretty quiet. And very few of our guys got shot at, and it was much more peaceful tour than I had anticipated, or any of us had anticipated. And so, our one claim to fame is we. During the Gulf War, there was the first guy shot down, a U.S. Navy pilot named Scott Spiker, and in the desert, we actually found his aircraft. We knew where the aircraft was. A lot of people had found it. They had sent teams in there to pull sensitive equipment off of it, but no one had found him. And so we mounted up an operation, if you will, with a lot of heavy equipment, sifting equipment, bulldozers, backhoes, all of this stuff, and just started this big desert sweeping count. I had a company commander. A company commander.
Was he a Marine?
Yeah. Oh, he was a Navy pilot.
He was a Navy pilot. Okay.
But we went out there towards the end, as this thing is winding down in Iraq, and they were getting ready to pull more combat units out. There became this feeding frenzy, if you will, to hey, we got to find everybody that we haven't found.
Okay.
And so we started to participate.
So you already presume he's dead.
Yeah, we presumed he's dead. There had been sightings. There had been anecdotal sightings by people that said, hey, I'd seen his initials carved in a doorway here where we thought he'd been kept prisoner for a while. Over the years, people had brought in bones out of the desert and said, well, these could be him, and it turned out to be sheep bones or goats or whatever. And which is, a friend of mine worked for the recovery command in Hawaii, and so that's a very common thing. Whenever you're soliciting remains, what you typically get are a lot of people looking for money, and so they
get paid for doing this.
Well, we don't do that as a matter of policy. We don't, but people don't know that, and so they want some kind of reward, and they'll typically bring you animal bones, right? And so we mounted up this effort in the desert and scraped a lot of desert. My company commander in that company reinforced it, and so I just love this story. I wish we could write a book about it someday, because the airplane we'd been out there for a while. There was some bad weather coming in. We couldn't find anything from this guy. No remains whatsoever. And they'd work all night and sleep during the day because it was just so hot. And I've got pictures somewhere, and it looked like the surface of Mars. It really did. Nothing in sight that would remind you that you were on planet Earth, and really hot. And these guys would sit around at night smoking cigars and talking, trying to strategize. What do we do next? How, why can't we find this guy? What's the grid pattern that we should be doing? And I had a brilliant air officer, Marine Corps captain, F-18 pilot. So he knew this was an F-18 that Scott Spiker had flown. He knew a lot about the F-18s. He had ejected from an aircraft at one point in time. Something happened to the aircraft, he ejected. So that was a key part of the puzzle, is that when the Scott Spiker's aircraft hit, it had a sympathetic ejection. And so he'd actually lost his arm. He was dead by this time, we figure, or died in the impact.
What's a sympathetic
ejection? For some reason, the aircraft hit.
And then he's ejected?
And then, that triggered the ejection system somehow, and he ejected upon impact.
Wouldn't that be too late?
Yeah, he did. So because of that, we figured he was either knocked out in the air or he was dead already. So if he hits the ground, he had not ejected, and something was wrong, right? And so in the course of that, we know he had lost an arm, because that had been found by a Bedouin years before that.
His arm had been
found. But no sign of him. And so my air officer figured it out. He said they watched the wind patterns over several days, and my air officer just did the math, and he said, hey, if he had a sympathetic ejection here, that would have carried, he would have gone to a certain altitude. The wind speed is estimated at this. He would have drifted so long. It takes this long to come down.
Bingo.
You know, here's a goose egg a couple kilometers away.
Right here.
He's got to be here. You know, if he's anywhere, he's in that goose egg. So they pick up this whole, they had like 48 hours left or something like this. They pick up this whole lash up and they start marching this direction. Just like you know, Moses through the Sinai desert, you know. And they've got Marines out in front screening and looking for things, and pretty soon Marines start coming back and going, hey, found this stainless steel ring. It's not part of the desert, right? And my air officer would say, that's a piece of the connecting hose that did whatever. All these pieces. So the debris field started to increase. They got there, long story short, they scraped, they find his skull.
Oh, wow.
And we had his dental records on site, and we were able to, you know.
How long had it been? How long had
Oh,
it been?
wow. So that was 2009, right? And so Desert Storm was, gosh, what was that? 91?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a long
Was it
time.
91? 91?
Yeah,
It was 91.
yeah.
You're right. You're right. I remember that.
So a long time.
Wow.
And they found it. These guys did a great job. And I think there was a couple of interviews, and the commandant came out. It was a big deal. Yeah.
They didn't have a proper burial, all of that.
Yeah, I returned the remains, and then the
Returned the
Navy.
remains, right.
Yeah. So it was that was our one big claim to fame, and I say ours, but really there was a particular one of our companies did this and did a great job. And then I come here eventually, go to Pacific Command. I was the Southeast Asia Division Chief, and then I became the Chief of War Plans there for 2 years of my life I'll never get back, and it's very hard work. And then I come here. And to do essentially advisor duty. We didn't call it that, but that's really what we were trying to, and that's what the Japanese wanted was, hey, help us put this thing called an amphibious capability together. Had been started by another guy, Grant Newsham, who is a prolific writer, national security writer, great guy and a good friend. He started the position. I picked it up from him, and so midway, so 2016, I get a call, and my boss says, hey, I need you to go to Iraq for 6 months. So I went back to Iraq in 2016 as on a staff in Baghdad, and that was during the ISIS fight. And that was the worst tour of duty, the most difficult tour of duty that I've ever had to
Why?
do. Yeah. I tell people, you know, jokingly, it's way easier to get shot at than it is to be 7 days a week, you know, waking up at 4:35 in the morning I was the operations officer. I was the CJ3, the Combined Joint Operations Officer for the whole country of Iraq. So we had drawn all this infrastructure down and all these units down, and then the ISIS thing hits, and we quickly send, you know, a headquarters organization back in, but it's much smaller now, and so it's got the whole country of Iraq to worry about with a senior command in Kuwait, a 3-star. So it was 6 months of, you know, day on, stay on. So, and then you know, you broken sleep. You'd have to get up in the middle of the night to approve strikes. And myself, the lawyer, the intel guy, the commanding general, and
sounds to me like you had a bad case of having to deal with a lot of people.
Yeah.
and a lot of different attitudes and thoughts about how it should be done.
Yeah, and most of my officers, I had 90 officers, and most of them were not Americans. So they were mostly NATO countries. Great guys. My deputy was a British officer. A lot of Brits. Dutch Marine, had British Royal Marines. I had Australians. Fantastic guys. It shows the power of a formal alliance like that, where guys are training to the same doctrine. And I came back and tried to impart some of these lessons on the Japanese. In fact, I say right now, the self-defense forces should just adopt NATO doctrine. You know, that gives them trying to be interoperable with the United States, and we are interoperable to a certain extent, but there are a lot of incongruities there, and it's like trying to take you've been to the UK and seen their plugs, right? Big 3 prongs. Yeah, take that to America and try to stick it in it. It just doesn't always work, right? And so culturally and doctrinally, we have those issues because the Japanese have their own doctrine, and it's not, and generally speaking, it's not even close to American, which is NATO doctrine. And so we have trouble with that sometimes.
Tell me this, okay, so where you are now, you're retired. What's it been like for you since you've gotten out of the service? Now you're with Raytheon.
Yeah, with a company called Raytheon, and this is on my own. I have to make the disclaimer statement that I'm doing this on my own time and own volition, and not on as a representative of Raytheon. But worked for Raytheon. Retired in 18. The goal was to keep our youngest daughter in high school, last kid in high school. So we started a consulting company to stay here. You can't just stay in Japan. You have to have a status. So I started a consulting company, had 2 wonderful clients, Snap-on Tools and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, who...
You did this alone by yourself?
Yeah, my wife and I.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the CEO.
All right.
And I used to jokingly say, meetings are short, and everyone generally agrees, and so it was fantastic, The board was very small.
There you go.
And we did that.
For how long?
For about 5 months. And we were paying the rent, paying the electric bill, but that was about it. And I had been started interviewing with Raytheon, and then was blessedly accepted. And I tell people, hey, founding your own company when you're in your mid-50s, it sounds really sexy, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to prove that I could do it.
But it's hard if you've been working.
Yeah,
it's very difficult.
Yeah, I remind myself of the guy in The Matrix, the first movie, who they take him out, and he goes back in and has that meeting and says, hey, put me back in. Put me back in the Matrix.
Put me back in, but this is the condition.
Yeah, right.
Eat the steak. I know this isn't real steak.
I know this is a real steak, but put me back in.
Right.
So I got grafted back into the Matrix, and happy as
you can be.
Yeah.
Right on everything. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, now I like to end the podcast by asking this question. What do you consider a good life in Japan to be? You've only been in Japan. You've been in Japan for a while.
Quite a while. Yeah, off and on. You do the math, added up about 20 years. And so most of that military time, obviously. I think, to be brutally honest, the best status in Japan is to be an expat with an expat package in Japan. Because you're a sofa status guy with getting cost of living allowance and all this other stuff, because you have access to a whole different line of supply chain, personal family supply chain, things that you need, want, whatever, right? Somebody else is paying for your house. The greatest thing that money does for you is buys options and freedom, right? Money is not happiness, but it provides options. And so, Japan is a very convenient place to live, but the best status, I think, from an American point of view, is to be here as an expat, because you're kind of doing your own thing, right? You're not subject to everything that.
And if anything happens, we can get taken out.
Yeah, you can leave.
Leave real quick.
There's an exit door, right? So, right.
Chris, I want to thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you very much. I enjoyed it very much.
It
was fantastic.
I want to thank all of you that are watching this podcast. Make sure you press like and subscribe. And remember, it's all unknown, so continue to reach for the stars, because you're too blessed to be stressed.